Hi there, and welcome to What Are You Thinking About? The show where we ask the question and that dictates our conversation. My name is Adam Freedom. I am a Melbourne-born and bred stand-up comedian, musician, writer, poet, and filmmaker. Follow me at AdamFreedom_ on Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Adam Freedom, and like my Facebook page. And if you love the podcast, think about becoming a patron. My guest today is Kee'ahn. She is a hypnotic queer Aboriginal and Zenith-Kaz Chanteuse that has roots from the Gugu-Yalanji, Jedaboo, and Bardu Island people. Hailing from Townsville, Queensland, where she grew up around the Wik peoples, she made her way down to Melbourne to pursue her dreams as a soulful songwoman, performing for nearly 3 years all over the city. Her name means to dance, to sing, to play, and that is exactly what she is doing in stunning fashion. She is 22 years old and has just released a modern Australian classic called Better Things, which was produced and recorded by multi-instrumental and multilingual musician Pataphysics, aka Pat Marks, explaining where the beautiful trumpets in the mix come from. This single is a track from her yet-to-be-released debut album, In Full Bloom. She describes the track as trying to grow out of tough situations, reflecting and learning and finally trying to bloom. With her father, Maxwell Lenoy, also contributing backing vocals for the track, it is an amalgamation of being hopeful, identifying the weeds, problems with our mental health such as anxiety and depression, the unknown and keeping one's connection to their ancestors and home, to move through ourselves and make our flowers bloom. Speaking about flowers, the sublime single cover was designed by Michael Jalaru Tora, a Jugan and Yarraroo man with tribal connections to Jabir and Gooniyandi people, with Kee'ahn in a midsummer-esque crown, a First Nation queen. Supported by Creator Victoria and Homelands, a collective of young and established First Nation artists and guest artists, practitioners who come together to connect through song with audiences at gatherings around the world. She premiered on Triple J Roots and All, featured in Triple J Unearthed during Reconciliation Week and Sydney's 2SER, and appeared on Yarning with Brian Nakoviz via the Rock Wiz Facebook page. She has performed at St Kilda Festival, Laneway Festival, Woodford and Signet Folk Festivals, Yirramboi First Nations Festival, and when featured on songs Ancestors and Indigenous Land by Dreaming Now, aka Yorta Yorta Man, Neil Morris, both produced by Riverboy. She performed at Golden Plains, Big Sound, Splendor in the Grass Forum, and Dark Mofo. She was a part of the VMDO First Peoples Showcase earlier this year and also curated the 11th week of Isol-Aid with artists like Dancing Water, Aaron B., Monica Caro, Dimpa, and Mariel Spearham. She has also performed mesmerizing covers by such artists as Ed Sheeran, Florence and the Machine, Sia, Elvis, Vance Joy, London Grammar, and so on. Kee'ahn's angelic guitar and vocals mesmerize anyone that encounters her, including myself.
That was such a nice intro.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try to pride myself on my intros. Yeah, so I think a little about how I first discovered you. I was at an event called Sapology in Footscray, and you were performing there among other spoken word artists and poets and other musicians, people of color, Aboriginal, Sudanese people, a lot of females as well, and it was really beautiful. Like my friend was also performing in the show, but when you came and performed, I was just mesmerized because as a musician myself, like your guitar playing was like amazing, these beautiful melodies and chords, and just your singing was just like the whole audience was just like mesmerized. It was really great. And I think I came up to you afterwards and said I loved it so much. How do I listen to more stuff? And you said, "Oh, I'll be releasing it soon." And so here we are.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I was at Sapology, and that's great. Yeah, we met. It was such a lovely event, just highlighting and centering Black and Indigenous people.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, that was such a great event for sure.
So yeah, let's get down to it. What are you thinking about today?
Amidst everything, I've been kind of thinking too much, especially in isolation. You get lost in your thoughts. But because I'm someone that has social anxiety, I've been really like thinking about and researching and watching lots of interviews and thinking about communication really.
So do you feel like, because communication is such a. I always think about communication because I feel like that's everything we do, really. Is communication.
Mm-hmm.
As much as we feel like sometimes, especially as you said, in isolation, we feel trapped or we feel like, maybe we can't communicate. I feel like we're always communicating nowadays, like everywhere, social media, when you talk to your friends online and things like that, but also communicating with our art. Like life is a lot about communication. What are some aspects of communication you were thinking about?
I think really mainly what my intentions are in my music and in my stories that are really being highlighted with the release of Better Things. I've been asked a lot about what my plans are for the future and what the intentions are behind my songs, and it's really just trying to think about how to communicate the best with words, because how I really started with music was because I struggled to find how to put my thoughts into words, and I just sing instead, as cheesy as that sounds. So that's been just a really hard thing for me to try and figure out, because in my sets, similar to this Apology Showcase, I just would rather say a couple words and then just sing everything else out that I'm trying to say. But I guess I've been trying to understand humor. And I was really excited to talk to you about communication because I've read that you're a comedian as well. And I don't know, I've been trying to understand why we as humans really love laughing and comedy and humor.
Definitely, humor is a way to connect and to, I feel like, unravel. It's also I feel like for comedians, the personality type is definitely a self-defense mechanism at point, because the world sometimes gets so grotesque and so funny and crazy that you kind of have to laugh at it or you'll kind of go insane. You know what I mean? So yeah, humor is a interesting communicator. Like, I mean, the difference between humor and music is that with music, you can sort of embrace the artist and let them flow ideas directly to you, and they're from the soul and the heart, and you feel the musician. But with a comedian, it also has to be about the audience as well. And that's one of the most challenging things, is to connect with an audience. How have you found connecting with an audience with your music?
I guess, just being really honest. I've tried in the past going on stage and trying to put on this kind of persona of being really outgoing, and it just doesn't feel right, and I don't get that same feedback afterwards about people really connecting with me and the song. So I think I'm just used to, or I'm just trying to be completely genuine and going up there and being like, hey, I've got anxiety. This is pretty hard for me, but I love singing, so here we go. And a lot of people appreciate that, which is really lovely. I've watched some sketches by Simon Amstel. I really like his kind of approach to comedy because he's just hella vulnerable. And
I love Simon Amstel. I remember when I was a bit younger, always watching Nevermind the Buzzcocks, and he was the host, and he did so many funny things. But his way to sort of do it is just to, as you said, to just reveal yourself. And I think, as I was saying before, you have to, not only humor is about unraveling truth, but also music, as you've just said, to be honest with yourself. How do you think the progress of being honest has come about for you? Do you feel like it's just through practice and maybe just doing shows around Melbourne has helped you, or do you feel like you've had to really soul search and self-reflect?
Definitely a lot of soul searching and self-reflecting, but also I guess it's a mixture of what you said, doing the soul searching, but also putting myself in these uncomfortable situations so that I have to grow and I have to learn and address that it's a bit stressful, if that makes sense. But mainly in isolation, I think a lot of soul searching is happening. Thinking about how I want to connect with people, not just on the stage, but my friends and my family, and the intentions when I am communicating. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't understand that, as we said, communication is everything. And if communication is everything, then communication is everything in relationships, you know? And so a lot of people don't understand that you have to actually put in work for these relationships. They're, you know, it's not like, oh, you know, you'll have a relationship with someone and it's going to be all grandiose, and, you know, you'll be able to talk all the time, and, you know, it'll be perfect, you know, because you both are so special people and you love each other, or you're friends, or you connect. But that's very rare. You know, connection is really rare, like, especially nowadays. So communication, you know, you need to work on your relationships with communication. It's something I've struggled with, especially with my anxiety, because when you communicate, you're vulnerable, you know, and if you actually say your internal feelings, then the other person might get hurt, or the other person might not take it the way you want it to. And I feel like that's a lot of anxiety comes from, especially with other people. Would you say the same about your anxiety with others?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely kind of mind reading, getting nervous about what the other person might be thinking when we obviously can't mind read. I don't know about you. Yeah, but I think something that's helped me is really, not focusing on myself as much and thinking about, like, really trying to connect in the moment rather than being like, oh, this person is thinking about me this way, rather than thinking about the actual content of what they're saying. But it is a hard thing. Like, I'm sure so many people experience anxiety, or that's what I've learned, because I always thought growing up, like, oh my God, why am I like this? No one else seems to experience anxiety like I do, which is totally not true.
I felt for ages I was like the crazy one that was like, no one understands me. I'm having a panic attack over, you know, a toothbrush, you know, like whatever. But in reality, you know, so many people, everyone deals with anxiety, but it's just to the degree. It's either, you know, a mental health problem or a disorder. In my case, it is a disorder. And so I try not to beat myself up about it too much. Like I used to a lot. I used to always think like, you know, why am I like this? Why can't I connect with people? Why can't I understand other people? And exactly as you said before, it's just about putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. Do you feel like in your new music that, I guess, expressing yourself with your music, that you're trying to focus more on other people?
I think that's definitely the path that I want to take with my music. Like the first kind of set of songs that I've written have mainly been about me feeling really weird about myself, and I think I'm finally at that stage where I'm like, it's not centered around that. I want to really write songs about my people and about empowering myself. And I think Better Things is kind of the start of that. I think especially the climate that we're in, with, I don't know, everything being brought to light, to the attention with police incarceration and Black and Indigenous people being, mainly targeted. I'd really like to write music or create more art that centers my voice and other Black people's voices, because it's so important in kind of the industries that I'm navigating in.
Yeah, of course. And it's difficult, you know, to talk about how you feel about these things, because it is complex, and there's so many sides to it, and I feel like it is even more vulnerable than talking about yourself, because it is something that, even though you might understand, you might have never experienced those things, you know? Yeah, it's just crazy. Like I was seeing these Facebook ads about, I think it was Amnesty Australia, and they were showing the police cages, these child cages, and they were just ridiculous. And I didn't understand how that was still a real thing, you know? And like 432 Indigenous people have died in custody since 1991. It's just crazy. But it is hard to express that in music. Political music is something really hard to write, and to connect with people so directly about an issue. It has to have sort of a balance between having a part of you, but also having a part of what's happening as well. How do you think you'll navigate that?
Yeah, I think definitely kind of trying to find that balance, like you said,
Mm,
trying to tap into kind of that headspace where, yeah, I'm being really authentic about my experiences with everything that's going on in a way that can, yeah, kind of inspire, yeah, maybe inspire, yeah, other mob. I don't know. I think the path that I've chosen with music is really important to me as a way to kind of amplify other Indigenous queer
mm.
people, because everyone says this that's similar to me in this position, but like growing up, you don't see that representation. So there's kind of that. It's a great opportunity, I guess. I don't know where I'm going with this. What was the question?
No, you're doing fantastic, and I understand that when you get a platform or almost you're at a point where you can pull other people up, it is important to do so, you know. And I feel like that's a fantastic way of looking at it. But I don't think you should. I think you should be proud of yourself from the start, because as you said, you have to, your songs have been about you and have been a way to sort of communicate and to be therapeutic and to sort of figure things out in yourself. But now you're at a place where you can sort of expand and pull other people up with you. I don't know where I'm going with this either. But it's it's a challenging thing. I know you've worked with Homelands, which I'd love to know more about, because they're definitely a collective of Indigenous artists, and that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing to be a part of. So I was contacted by them last year. I was invited to be a part of a group that went to Signet Festival, and also the National Folk Festival in Canberra. And Homelands is just like this collective of Indigenous people from all ages that are musicians and artists and
Mm,
creators. And it's really cool because a couple of the founders are based in Turtle Island in Canada. So it's really amazing to be able to meet other Indigenous people from across the world and just like relate to them. Like this kind of struggle, this same experience is not just in Australia. It's in America, it's in Turtle
yeah,
Island,
exactly.
Canada. And like to meet other people that are sharing their message through song as well is pretty
Mm,
cool. So the Homelands has been great. I'm really keen to grow with them, and I'm super grateful that they've put their support in me with the single. Yeah, it's definitely what I want to do with my music.
that's awesome. Yeah. And have you felt like um, working with Homelands and other Indigenous artists that's helped you with your communication?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that there's definitely like power and inspiration that I've gathered from working with other Indigenous artists. Specifically like at Woodford Folk Fest that we did Christmas, New Year's. Yeah, I was kind of put in this position where I had to facilitate a discussion on stage, and I was like, oh my god, this is so much. How am I going to do this? But it was such a good learning experience, and I was like, oh man, I can actually do that. That was kind of cool being an interviewer rather than, yeah, no, that's what I mean. It was good to be an interviewer. Going back to like humor, it's cool being able to connect with people on like that level of being Indigenous and dealing with colonization and being like a minority in your own country. But then also like being able to connect with a mob across the globe through humor is pretty cool as well.
Mm, that connection that you've sort of talked about through humor. It's interesting because, you know, as much as these things are horrible, you know, the still no treaty, the Indigenous people are being shut down for protesting everywhere, Indigenous people in police custody, everything, you know, like the every issue you can ever think of. It's a tragedy, and that we still don't talk about to this day, you know, and it's not exposed, but we're getting there slowly. But I mean, it's just too slow. But even though the climate is happening, you know, and we are pushing pretty fast at this point, you know, in time, it could get shut down. And the only way to sort of, as I said before, deal with that sort of tragedy and turn it into something positive is that humor. And how do you sort of deal with the fact that you have to sort of laugh at these things to get through life instead of change happening?
I think it's so multifaceted because it's such a complex
Mm,
issue. I think humor is like one aspect of like coping and
mm,
healing, but I think it's a bridge from community and like community care and like
mm,
connecting together on a I don't know kind of deeper level. I think with that is how we'll be able to enact change, that like listening and sharing stories and yeah, sometimes finding the humor in like really difficult situations. I think, yeah, what I was meaning with like finding humor with the fellows from Turtle Island, the Canadian Aboriginal friends that I've made is like just being able to laugh at the kind of silly things that we experience as Indigenous
mm.
people and how, like, yeah, like what you're saying, it's a bit laughing at trauma, but mainly just connecting and having that community.
Well, I feel like it's the first step. And then once you've got that basis and everyone's sort of, as you said, that deeper connection, then you can all work towards something that has changed, and you can speak out, advocate, things like that.
Mhm.
And I feel like artists today, especially platforms like Triple J, Unearthed, and platforms that you've been on, are educating people in Australia, are saying, look, this is still a thing. It hasn't gone away. You need to recognize it and stand up with us in solidarity. Do you feel like you want your music to be, your music is inspiring, and I would say it is already inspiring, but
Thank you.
are you also trying to get others to find that solidarity with Indigenous people?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm one of many Indigenous people advocating for our
Mm,
rights, and it's quite frustrating having to be like, yeah, I'm human, you should be supporting me.
exactly, yeah.
But it's like, yeah, it's something that we as Black and Indigenous people have had to be doing for so many
Mm,
years. And it's more like thinking about our next generation and yeah, how our fight and our successes, I don't know, navigating spaces like Triple J that are doing better now, but still need to be doing
I
more
agree,
to help
yeah.
people. I guess it's tiring and it's
Mm,
frustrating, but there's so much power in them thinking about past generations and future generations. It's been, I don't know, with the past couple of weeks on social media, so many people have been highlighting Indigenous and Black people.
mm.
No, what's my train of thought?
That's all right. In saying that, have there been moments in your career so far that you've felt like there still is a problem with representation, especially of Indigenous people? And have you ever felt shut down or made to feel smaller?
It's a bit. It's not. Sometimes it's not completely out there where you feel that as soon as you walk in, but there's just that. I don't know. A little bit just in kind of all spaces you navigate.
Mm,
Because I guess music is quite a bit of a boys' club, and then coming into it as this Indigenous queer woman,
mm,
it's interesting to navigate. But what's been really cool is being able to meet other women in the industry and just learning from them from their experiences and how they've been able to, I don't know, forge their way. It's I don't know, it's something that I've been gathering inspiration
yeah.
from. Yeah, because I don't know, I've really only just started putting out
Mm,
music and gigging and I don't know, thinking of this more as like a business rather than like, oh yeah, I just like this thing. I'm only really just kind of understanding that the structure of the music industry really was built to cater for a specific range of people, and now I don't know, that's growing,
mm.
it's changing. Yeah.
No, and it's a beautiful thing to watch, but it's sad that it's a necessary thing now. It should have already been there. I think about especially as you said, it is a boys club almost, and they're still holding on to ideals of, the Aussie artist with his acoustic guitar, but people are breaking those walls down, like, for example, Camp Cope. I'm a huge fan of Camp Cope, and they once
Yeah, me
got
too.
told, that they couldn't book out the Sydney Opera House, and they did, and it was a beautiful thing to watch, and I was so proud and just happy to hear about that. What are some more changes that you'd like to see in the music industry, and how could those be communicated better?
I think definitely, yeah, having Indigenous people, having Black people, and just people of color in
Mm,
general, in yeah, higher levels of like I want to see more Aboriginal artists that are managing themselves or have their own labels or
mm,
have their own radio shows or kind of just creating for themselves and for their people and in a way that's not tokenistic.
mm,
I think that's something to kind of avoid or that I've been a bit aware of coming into this. Like, not thinking, oh, I'm just going to be put on this bill because I'm
mm.
Aboriginal or because I'm a woman. Something that's like really genuine about highlighting Indigenous people because, like, we're creating on Indigenous land. It's got to be really genuine
Yeah.
about giving back to community. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Definitely, of course, and people think that, just because you've got an Aboriginal woman on a lineup or a woman on the lineup, it even happens in comedy, in humor. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll be on a lineup and there's no women on or anyone
Mm-hmm.
of color. And sometimes I'm on a lineup and they feel like they have to put in a woman, or they feel like they have to put in an Indigenous person, and it's almost not honest at points. And it becomes frustrating because we have the talent, such as yourself. We have the talent to have Indigenous artists and people of color in the mainstream, yet we sort
Mm-hmm.
of put them on the outskirts, or it's only once in a while, or it's tokenistic, as you said. It's
Mm-hmm.
a it's hard, and for people to communicate better with each other and have a discourse, we need people of color. We need women. We need queer people, Indigenous people in the front lines of the mainstream, communicating to Australia that this is Indigenous land. This is, we want to create music that we love and connect with people and inspire people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's totally happening. I've seen on like Instagram and Facebook about how Calvin Klein have this new model that's on one of the biggest billboards or whatever,
Mm,
and she's like black and queer and trans, and it's really cool like seeing that representation. And like you said, like Triple J are doing better with their
mm,
representation. I know that they've got like this sister Mali Silva who's been doing some radio hosting, and like you said, it's totally out there. It's more like amplifying, highlighting, centering those
mm.
voices. I think Sophology did such a good job of that. It was like all black, but they like Wani made sure that Indigenous mob are represented, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it was really great. Have you had a path of connecting to your Indigenous roots and your ancestors? Has that been those trials and tribulations? What was your journey like of understanding yourself and your culture? Because even though it might seem like it's all around you, there is still an internal struggle. Like for me, I'm half Greek and half Tunisian or Tunisian. It was really hard for me to navigate that as a biracial person and like understand who I was and my culture and my ancestors, and sometimes we can repress it or try to make ourselves feel like we need to be more of that or something like that. What has your journey been like?
That's such a good question. I really relate to what you said about, like, yeah, I guess being biracial, because I am Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, and then my grandfather was a white Australian Irish fella. And it's, yeah, the journey, I guess, for me has been I don't know, I guess interesting is the best word to say. Like, because Australia is this colonized country where, I don't know, the white surfer dude is the
Mm,
stereotype, does that kind of push to forget about your heritage or your race and just kind of assimilate. Yeah, I could say I definitely felt that kind of growing up, but I've also had that want and that knowing. Sorry. I've also had that, yeah, growing up with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander parents. That I can't forget that. I can't assimilate because, like, this is my family.
mm,
And that's such a fortunate thing for me. I'm really privileged that, like, my parents have been able to carry stories from my grandparents and so on, because, like, the reality of this country is, like, so many mob have history and ancestors that have been stolen, and there's those lost stories. So I guess with my identity, I've just had to communicate with my parents and really listen and learn about where I come from, where my family comes from. It'll be lost, you know? Yeah, so it's definitely empowering. I think that's where I finally got in high school. I think I was a bit, yeah, I wasn't in the same headspace that I'm in now. I was more
mm.
like, it's easier to conform and be like, oh, I just, you know, maybe I should go to Australia Day parties, or maybe I should just, I don't know. Yeah, I'm Aboriginal, but that's sometimes hard because people don't want to see me as Aboriginal.
Mm,
You know what I mean? There's those stereotypes that, like, white Australia has pushed that's negative and kind of hard to combat. But moving away has been really empowering
mm.
to be able to understand my identity. Definitely, it's been a weird journey, but a good
Yeah.
one.
And I would feel it would be so hard to communicate those things to other people. And you're probably still going on that journey yourself, you know, and moving to Melbourne and discovering new things and connecting with other people, because that communication is so deep. It's about who you are as a person, your identity,
Mhm.
and communicating that is crazy. I think, well, not crazy, but really difficult, I would say. And how have you felt? Have you felt like you've been able to communicate that side of yourself to other people more easily, or felt like you were able to?
I think it's every time that I have been able to communicate that, it gets easier to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely about, like, trying to find the words. And I think because growing up, it was ignored a lot.
Mm,
Um, Having the opportunity now to really be like, so, yeah, empowered. I'm going to keep saying empowered because that's how I feel. Like,
yeah.
so empowered in who I am as an Indigenous person. Speaking about it gets easier because there is strength in it. Like, there's this quote about that mob says, like, "Don't be ashamed, be game," and also, like, you got to walk like all your ancestors are walking behind you.
Mm,
So it's been interesting communicating it because I've also been on this like thought process pathway kind of thing about how my anxiety, I feel, has stemmed from intergenerational trauma,
mm,
and how, like, I want to be such an advocate for my people and for, like, Black women specifically,
mm,
because, like, my grandma and my great grandma and most the women in my family weren't able to speak up.
mm.
I think that being so strong in my identity and trying to push through that anxiety is, yeah, I don't know how to word this.
No, you're doing it's so beautiful, that that phrase, act like your ancestors are walking behind you. I've never heard that before, and that's such a beautiful sentiment, because I do think about my ancestors sometimes, what they've been through. Like I live with my grandmother, and she's Greek, and she came from this little village, and they were farmers. But I remember connecting with her, and she'd always tell me stories about, you know, the traumas she's been through, what she's seen. Like we don't know her birthday because the Nazis burnt her records, you know, and things like that. And just a lot of horrible things. And even on my dad's side, like the Tunisian people have really faced a lot from French colonialism in North Africa, and
Mm.
it's interesting. And I've been trying to connect more with my ancestors and understand our past, you know. And I feel like it's easier to communicate who you are when you understand your past. And I feel like so many people forget that. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they said, well, but we're here. Why do you keep thinking about the past? Why do you keep going back into the
Yeah.
past? And it's like, because the past is what made us here. The past is what created the
Yeah.
present. So how could you ignore it?
Exactly.
Do you feel like, you know, this might be a very out of field question, but do you feel like you're, as you said, act like your ancestors are walking behind you? Your music is so soulful and really hits the heart and you really connect with it. Do you feel like sometimes you're voicing sort of your ancestors when you sing, or voicing your people, or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely resonate with that sentiment. Like, absolutely, my ancestors are kind of flowing through me when I sing.
mm,
I think about like decolonization a lot and how my presence just on stage is an act of kind of defying, I don't know, all the trauma that my ancestors have gone through. So that is really what motivates me, despite like feeling really anxious about it.
mm,
But that's what motivates me to share my voice, because yeah, the people before me didn't have that voice. Um,
mm,
and also like going off of kind of what you said with your family, I think that's why it's so important to really talk about our past, because really everyone has these stories, but it's just not spoken
mm,
about. And how, because Australia is a colonized country and we all come from like so many different walks, it's more about like sharing those stories. I've been able to connect with so many people down here because I don't know, we all relate to in some aspect about like our family or our ancestors fighting for something so that we can be here today. But I guess now it's more like supporting others that don't have those same rights that other people do.
absolutely. That I've, you know, never been recognized. Like my grandmother came in the 60s from Greece, and on the last episode I was talking about how they never really talked about the racism they went through, but I think it was there. But nowadays you don't really hear about Italians and Greeks being, you know, racially abused or harassed or things like that. So it's time for our people to stand in solidarity and use that privilege to sort of boost up Indigenous people, boost up Black people, boost people of color.
Yeah, exactly right. Especially like because we're on like black
Mm,
land, and I don't know, Indigenous people haven't been given that rights for since colonization. So it's more like we're all on this country that was cared for thousands and thousands of years before anyone else came. It's like it's just the right thing to do
mm.
to amplify and to stand in solidarity with mob. Mm.
Yeah. And do you feel like, as we were talking about your music becoming more objective and sort of coming outside of yourself and talking more about your people, how do you feel like you want to get people to empathize with you? Because some people will never understand it, you know, especially in reality, white people, Australian people that have had this sort of privilege will never really understand it. And that's sort of where this misinformation, this sort of biased view comes from. How do you think we can communicate empathy through our art?
It's such a good question. Yeah, I honestly think just coming down to it, it's just trying to be as authentic and genuine as possible with the stories that I'm sharing, because like we've talked about, everyone has those stories. So it's kind of just trying to get people to relate to me and my people, or the struggles that my grandparents have gone through or my parents have gone
Mm,
through, because I'm sure just to some degree, maybe it's too optimistic or hopeful that like people who, yeah, I just think everyone goes through something in some aspect or has some sort of trauma. So it's more like these, just understanding like Indigenous people will experience and have experienced trauma and disparity like every single
yeah.
day. And it's just like listening to those stories and just having an open kind of heart and an open mind and thinking, just because I don't experience this, I can understand it to some sort of level through my lens because I've experienced something similar. It might not be that, and I understand that I do have privilege, but I can empathize, or I can just imagine myself in their shoes, or I can listen to their stories, or I can read the books that Aboriginal people have shared, or I can, I don't know, follow and just center, like surround myself with Indigenous content and just understand that, like, for me, it all just comes down to like heart and being genuine and connecting regardless of race or sexuality or anything else.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's like too obvious.
No, that was perfect. And I think unless you're a psychopath or a sociopath, you've been through something that you can empathize with, you know, and everyone has something, a struggle, if it's even internal or external struggle that can be used to empathize with Indigenous people, that can be used to empathize with people of color. And I think that's I don't think it is optimistic, because it's just a fact, in the sense that people have been through things, people have been through pain, and to understand pain from someone else's point of view is so important. You know, just coming back to that communication, do you sometimes feel like some days it gets really hard, as you said before, it gets really tiring, you know, to always be trying to build this empathy when it already should be there? How do you push through that? How do you push yourself through those feelings of anxiety or not being understood, or maybe feeling like you miscommunicated something? How do you push through that?
I think it's been hard to identify how to push through that, but I guess lately it's really knowing that I have a community of people that are going through the exact same thing. Yeah, and I guess it's been quite hard in isolation, but just being able to reach out and be like, it's been tough for me seeing all this stuff in the media and seeing how, or like just feeling hurt by all the trauma that's being, like, I don't know, so, what was I saying? Yeah, just I guess the sense of community. Like, I've been able to reach out to friends and family and be like, I don't know, this has been hard for me to see on Facebook and Instagram all the time. I understand why it's important, but it's kind of a lot. And just knowing that they're probably feeling the exact same way.
And as you said before, maybe you are feeling stronger, in the sense of, as you said, feeling empowered. And maybe that is the best way to get to communication, as you said, starting from the place of yourself, you know, I don't know who I am, and then maybe creating art or writing music about who you are, and then slowly just expanding. I guess it's a process of exponential growth, and then getting to a point where, when you do feel empowered, you can communicate even further. That communication helps you with the next communication, and you're able to, you know, keep communicating the important message that you want to. How do you think we can empower more people to make art, to stand up, to be in solidarity, to sort of push this, you know? How do you think we can empower more people to communicate what we've been discussing?
I think leading by example, for sure. Yeah, the fact that we're able to have this discussion is a step towards what needs to happen. I think just constantly pushing and communicating and leading by example and trying to empower others and just bringing it up over coffee or, I don't know, just a random chat with a stranger. Like, it's just needs to be applied in as many aspects of life as possible, because like this is what affects me and my people always.
Yeah.
So it's like, just talk about it more and consume more Black and Indigenous art and media, and talk people to follow, and like I said, just surround yourself and be a good listener and a supporter, and know that like you're not perfect and you're going to make mistakes, but it's about having those good intentions and trying to learn from the mistakes that you make. And I think that's how things will get better.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people feel like if they make a mistake when they're trying to be in solidarity with indigenous people or people of color, that they'll be whiplash, they'll be ostracized, they're too afraid to speak out. But in reality, it's like we're all here for you. We're all on the same page. Like you need to not be scared or to voice what you're thinking, to spread that if it's either anger or rage or beauty or empowerment, you need to be able to voice those things. It's interesting that you said that we have to lead by example. And do you feel like more people who are not of color should be creating more art that does discuss these issues? Do you feel like would that help in the struggle to push people of color to the forefront?
It's an interesting question because there's kind of a line between like, am I taking up space or am I giving Indigenous or Black people the space? I think talking about it is so important, but then it's also like who's benefiting from the discussion or like the art. Like my housemate's doing this really cool thing where he's been creating art, but he's making sure that all the funds go to warriors of the Aboriginal resistance so that it's going back to the community. Or there's been like instances online where non-Indigenous people have like written a song about like deaths in custody, but it hasn't been in the right tone where it's like sometimes it's got to be about who's telling the story. I need to answer that again. I don't know if that made sense.
No, that made complete sense. So in the sense of who is telling the story and where they're coming from, because there is this sort of thing where it's like it feels. I remember 2 podcasts ago I had shared a poem I had written after the death of George Floyd. And, I just posted it and I made sure that this is not about me. You know what I mean? This is just about adding to the other voices that are happening and trying not to take up space. Literally not take up space, not posting a fucking black square. Sorry. And it's just, I think it's really important for people to, as you said, not take up space. And also having a dialogue and working through it and being okay with making mistakes. Like,
I think that's so important.
Yeah. The last short film I made had themes about Australia and how we hide behind our dark history and our past. And it was interesting because when we took a break during the filming of that short film, everyone was white actress, white actors, Australian, non-Indigenous people. And we had a discussion halfway through the filming of the short film because it was discussing about, Australia's dark past. And we had this amazing conversation because the lead actress brought up these questions about it because she said, okay, what's the film about? And I said, well, it's about how we hide our dark past and what does it actually mean to be Australian, even though, this is not our land. And we had this amazing conversation. And then the rest of the filming was so smooth and beautiful. And I just remember that conversation to this day. And someone even brought up the point about, can we really have this conversation when there's not an Indigenous person here? And I said, well, my response to that was, that is true, but I feel like I need to use my privilege to be in solidarity with Indigenous people, but also not take up space and be more aware of how I communicate my feelings about that. When we are having these conversations and there isn't an Indigenous person there, can we still have a complete dialogue?
Absolutely. I think like these conversations need to be happening for a change to occur. Like it's unrealistic really for an Indigenous person always to be there to talk about Indigenous rights, and it's got to be about that solidarity from non-Indigenous people. but it's totally about the intent, and also like acknowledging that in these conversations that non-Indigenous people are having about Indigenous rights, that the intent is to understand and to learn and to educate, but also to know that like you're not going to be able to be the voice of Indigenous people,
Yeah.
and that you're going to make mistakes, and that you have to be open to going back and learning and being like, oh, maybe what I said there wasn't completely correct, and that's okay as long as I like, I don't know, just learn from the source from Indigenous people, that it'll be all right. Yeah, because I really think those conversations are important. It's been really cool the past couple of weeks with all this amplification of Black and Indigenous voices, that like some girls from high school that did not, like, I didn't really get along with because we had such difficult, like different political views, are like sharing all this stuff that's, I don't know, that I really support about my people. And it's obvious that they're having those conversations at home and with their family and with their friends, and that there's that solidarity there, and it just feels really cool. So I guess I just hope that, yeah, that those conversations keep happening, and that the good intentions are there.
Yeah. I hope those conversations keep happening too. And as we said, communication is everything. But on the flip side of that, we also need action, you know? And so in the sense of, we don't want to keep having these conversations for 100 years. Sometimes, you know, you keep talking the talk, but you never walk the walk, you know? And so
exactly.
I hope these conversations, especially now in this climate, have really opened people's eyes, and we need to act and change, you know? And especially just recognizing all the factors that are around us that can block our communication, like, you know, like the Murdoch media, you know, or like people shutting down our voices and not wanting to engage with us. I think just to finish up, what do you think is the easiest thing about communication, and what do you think is the hardest thing about communication?
Oh, it's such a good question. No, I don't even know how to answer that. It is the easiest and the hardest thing. I think for me, the hardest thing is just trying to find all the words to convey the intent of what I'm saying. But then I think the easiest thing is knowing that the intent is there, and I just got to keep trying, and it'll get there eventually. I think the easiest thing about communication is the privilege of having a voice, is that we all have a voice, and that's easy to do. We can all be vocal about something. The hardest thing, I think, is I think the hardest thing, but the most beneficial thing for us as individuals with communication, is finding, oh man, I don't know, it's such a hard question.
Yeah. And maybe that is it. Communication is tricky, but we're working through it. And I feel like, as you said, the easiest thing maybe for you, because you are so connected to your culture and you are so connected to trying to make Australia better and get people to be on the same page and find solidarity, is your resilience, you know? And that, as you said, if communication is everything, you know, you're very resilient to a lot. You know, your whole life is about resilience and trying to make a new tomorrow from the trauma of the past, you know? And I feel like, yeah, you're doing an incredible job. And I'm so excited to listen to your new album. I'm on all the press releases, it said, "Wow, it doesn't know when it's going to be announced," but you know, whenever it does come out, I'm excited for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. This was a fantastic conversation, and I feel like we touched on so many things, getting a deeper understanding about how we communicate things, you know, through humor and trying to, as I said before, make a better tomorrow for everyone, especially Indigenous people and people of color. So yeah, thank you so much for this. Was there anything you'd like to plug? Obviously, the new single that you can find Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, all of that stuff.
No, that's it. Hey, I don't know if you want to support me. I've got Instagram and Facebook and Thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah, of course.
It's been fun.
Yeah. You've also got a website that you can join the mailing list as well, which I did today. Get news about the new album when it comes out, and check out Kee'ahn. She's an amazing Indigenous artist, just moving things and disrupting, and it's exciting.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you like the podcast, think about subscribing to my YouTube channel, Adam Freedom, and liking the Facebook page. You can follow me at AdamFreedom_ on Twitter and Instagram. And if you like the podcast, think about becoming a patron. And yeah, just keep thinking about stuff.